Hello guys and welcome to another episode of Barbells with Banter podcast. Today I'm joined by my guest Heidi. Heidi Bucks is an EFT specialist. She's an emotional freedom expert, and I'm very excited to get talking about this, particularly at this time of year in the autumn. Or Heidi, do we call it fall down there, or is that still Americanized? Is it still autumn?
It's autumn in Australia, but we're actually in spring.
Oh God, yeah, of course you are. Yeah. As someone who understands physics, I already know that you're about to enter you're about to enter the spring equinox, I imagine, because we're approaching the autumn equinox. So you're just about to enter your nice warm period, and we're just about to get very cold and dull. As I'm looking outside now, it already is. Heidi, thank you very much for joining. Obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about your specialities today, which I think are really going to benefit the audience. We're going to be talking a lot about EFT tapping. I've had the pleasure of actually experiencing that myself last year, so I'm keen to know a little bit more, and hopefully the audience is too. So, Heidi, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I'm not going to go all the way back, but starting, sort of about 4 or 5 years ago, what really got me back into EFT, or really into EFT being emotional freedom techniques, which is also known as tapping. And I'll talk a little bit more in a minute about exactly what that looks like and how we use it. But how I got into it was because I was really struggling with my health. So it was probably around about 4 or 5 years ago. I was fairly stressed in my job. I was fairly stressed at home as well. And what I really noticed was that my health was failing. I had a lot of brain fog. I'd put on some weight. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't concentrate in conversations, and I was really worried about it. And so I started to learn a little bit more about holistic health. I did some study in functional medicine health coaching because I found it fascinating to understand how things like nutrition and exercise and a whole host of other lifestyle factors can really influence our health. And alongside that, at the same time, one of the things that you will know is that stress is a really major factor in our overall health and well-being. And one of the things that I had done a little bit of previously was EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques. I'd done it before. I was really interested, but I didn't know how to use it properly for myself. And I thought, I've done this functional medicine health coaching. Why don't I do a course on EFT tapping? And once I got back into it and really learnt it properly for myself, I have used it in so many different areas of my life, and it's been a massive game changer in terms of how I live my life, basically.
Amazing. And stress seems to be a common denominator in so many health issues. I mean, the saying is stress kills, and I believe that with every fibre, As a fitness professional, I have many people, obviously clients come to me for fitness goals, but I always say one of my most rewarding parts of my career is watching the benefit of fitness on stress. So when people walk into my gym, when clients come in and they're down, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed, that's a big word. But then when after just a little bit of exercise, they leave and they'll say, thank you, I needed that. That's the most rewarding part of my career. So stress is a common denominator. And how can EFT tapping help reduce stress exactly? I mean, obviously I've had it myself and I know a little bit, but how can it help reduce stress? And more specifically, especially for busy people, busy women who are juggling family and career, which is obviously the most contributing factors to stress. How can EFT help with that?
Oh my goodness. In a few different ways. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge the fact that, exercise and fitness really affects the mind because we're affecting the body. With EFT, we're doing both. We're acknowledging cognitively what we're thinking about, what it is that's stressing us out. So in EFT, essentially, let me just take it back one step. Essentially, emotional freedom techniques are a set of stress management tools that once you know how to do them properly, they can help to reduce stress and improve the quality of your life. Essentially, what we're doing with EFT is we're acknowledging the problem that we have And doing that by thinking about it, by talking about it, there's a little bit of exposure, a little bit of acknowledging that problem at the same time as physically tapping on acupressure points, which are very same or the similar, they're pretty much the same as ones that are used in acupuncture. So we actually stimulate these acupressure points. I'm doing it right now just on a couple of the points, just by tapping on them, which is why it's also called tapping. That tapping and stimulation of the acupressure point has been shown to send an electrical signal to the brain, to the parts of the brain that are responsible for stress and for our emotional well-being. So we're using that cognitive part of our brain, and we're actually using our body as well by tapping on various acupressure points to send signals into our brain to reduce the stress. So they've done quite a few studies on EFT tapping. It does, we can see it in terms of where those signals get sent, and we can also see it in things like cortisol levels. So EFT tapping will reduce your cortisol across the board, generally approximately about 40%. Reduction in cortisol levels in an EFT tapping session of somewhere between 20 minutes and an hour. And so we know that it actually reduces the stress response. So that's just a little bit about the science of it. So, but how does it work practically day to day? So you can use it just on a daily basis when you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed and stressed. You can do some very simple, basic EFT tapping techniques to reduce that stress response. So if you're a really busy person who doesn't have a lot of time, but you notice, I've got that, that really rushed, stressed, overwhelmed feeling, you can literally reduce that stress response in just a couple of minutes with 1 or 2 rounds of tapping. So it can be as simple as that in terms of reducing stress. The other way that we reduce stress is by actually addressing what it is that's causing the stress in the first place. Because ultimately stress is caused not only by the thing that we're experiencing, but actually how we perceive that thing. So I don't know, for example, if you have an interaction with your boss at work, 2 people can have the same interaction with the same boss, and one will find it really highly stressful, and another might just, whatever, who cares? That boss said something stupid again, And so it's actually in the perception, how we perceive the incident or the situation or, the pressure at work or the relationship at home or whatever it is that's really causing the stress. And when we can unpack that a little bit and start to recognize where it's coming from, the tapping actually will help us to release those emotional attachments and help us to change our perception. It actually rewires the brain to see things in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, when I had my experience with a therapist here locally to me, she was a client of mine, and she was a hairdresser. That was her trade initially, and then she discovered holistic therapy, and she swears it changed her life. As I'm sure you would agree, and many people who have experienced this. And initially, the first session was a bit more similar to Reiki, I would say, that I had with her. It was almost a hypnotic induction, which was a surreal experience. But the second time I went, she really honed in on the EFT. And yes, I was doing a lot of tapping, particularly around my wrist. And I was repeating these sentences to myself as I'm doing it. And you mentioned before about the connection of the body and the mind. So when it comes to that, like the tapping, whilst also saying sentences, is that to get things in sync with your emotion and your body? Is that why we do that? So if I'm tapping a certain part, because what she was getting me to do, I'll give her a shout out. She's called Tracy. She's fantastic, but she was getting me to tap, and then I was saying things like, "I am free. I am, resilient," and that's my favourite word. I'm going to talk about that a bit later, but my favourite word of this year. But we're tapping stuff. So, is that important? Is that all a part of getting in sync with the body? Because I love the nervous system and the endocrine system, particularly. Those two are the most impressive parts of the human body for me, and the mind. because they are literally the mothership of everything. So I'm a huge believer as a personal trainer, and as I mentioned to you before with examples, I see it. I literally see the benefit of the body and the mind working together. So yeah, is that important? And I guess that ties into, it's not just about tapping certain things. You have to truly believe it, don't you? You have to, and I guess that's why we say sentences, because we need to hear it in our head whilst we're tapping the physical body.
Yeah. So it's not 100% necessary to say things out loud, but it very much does help us to tune in and get really, really clear on what it is that we're trying to shift and change. And whilst we absolutely can do tapping on I'm feeling free and I'm feeling resilient, or whatever those positive affirmations are that we want to say and experience more of, what I always encourage with EFT tapping, and what the evidence and the research has shown, is that acknowledging the challenge, acknowledging the difficult emotion first, is really important. Because once we've acknowledged that, we've said it out loud, we've said, I feel angry, or I feel rageful, or I feel sad and hurt and betrayed, whatever the emotions are that are causing the issue in the first place. Because the negative emotions are the things that are causing us our issue, whatever it is that we want to shift, right? By saying them out loud and doing the tapping at the same time, we're allowing ourselves to express and feel that emotion, and that's what allows it to release, and it's also what allows it to heal. Once it's healed naturally, what our brain will do is it will bring forth those natural positive sentences, states, affirmations. So then you will feel free. Then you will feel resilient. You don't need to tap and say, I feel free, I feel resilient. You say, I hate this situation. I feel upset. I feel angry, whatever the things are. And we do usually repeat them a few times at the different points as we're tapping through. We repeat them a few times to really allow our body that time, and our nervous system that experience, to acknowledge and release whatever it is that we've been holding on to, potentially sometimes for some time. So sometimes it's just in the moment, I feel this right now, and sometimes it's something that has either happened in the past or is being re-triggered for us from something that's happened in the past. We're being reminded of a situation from earlier in life, and that's when we feel that really, extra bit of emotion. Those intense emotions are often because we've been triggered from something earlier, and that's our nervous system turning on and activating, and either going into that fight or flight response, or even potentially shutting down in a freeze response. And all of those responses are natural and normal, and we don't want to hold on to them for too long, because that's when we get into those chronic stress states. And that's what the tapping allows us to do, is it allows us to move through what we should have maybe moved through at some other time from an emotional perspective, experience it, genuinely let it release, and then we naturally feel freer, lighter, happier, seeing the situation as not nearly as stressful or complex. It naturally happens without us having to try.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of these ideologies of, stress is carried within the body, and like trauma, past trauma and stuff. And I've heard this years ago. And I've always sort of been like, well, no, surely not. Like it's all in the head. And through the recent years, especially post-pandemic, where I think that on an international scale really put people, obviously it's the most stressful thing internationally that I've been through in my life since 9/11. It's a big situation that all of us had to deal with, and I think that's a trauma that a lot of people are still carrying, even though it's 4 years now since that pandemic really kicked off. And I think I can understand, as I've studied more about the interlink between the brain and body, why that makes sense. Because yes, trauma is something that's emotionally a part of your brain, more specifically the temporal lobe. But the reality is the nervous system goes all through the body, and the body is the mind. Yeah, the brain is an organ, but the mind, it's consciousness is still it's called the great question. Great question in physics. There's no physicist that can describe what consciousness is. We're aware of it, we all know it, but it's not measurable. All we have is an organ in our skull that we know is in control of the consciousness, but we don't know how it works and interacts with the body. So I think that's why holistic, and then all the stress on actual medical practices stuff. I can understand why things like this are becoming so much more not only appealing to people but are working for people. Have you got an example then, Heidi? I'm sure you've got loads, but if you could describe the power of this on one specific person that you've done this treatment with, and you've seen such a massive, dramatic transformation in their life. They were really stressed, they needed this therapy. Obviously, it's probably worked with a lot of people in your case, but have you got one that springs to mind, a real example of where you've seen it and even you've gone, wow, this is incredible?
Yes. So I've got a few, and if it's okay, I'm going to start with a couple that are physically related, because you started off with that question talking about that mind-body connection and how we hold stress in our bodies. And without saying, EFT tapping is all of a sudden like the miracle cure for everything, I'm definitely not saying that. However, stress and emotions do get held in the body. So for me, for example, I had lower back issues and lower back pain for probably around about 20 years. And it took some time with EFT tapping. I started my journey. I thought I should try it on my lower back pain. I tried it a few times. It didn't happen overnight for me, but I'd had this injury and pain for 20 years. And with some time and with a little bit of persistence, I've now been without lower back pain for a couple of years, right? And so I know that's a small thing, but it shows what connection there can be. And that's one that wasn't an overnight success, but I also had a client who had a frozen shoulder, went to the doctor and was told, look, there's really nothing that I can do for you. I mean, other than injections to reduce the pain. And she was just like, whoa, hold on a second. I've only had this frozen shoulder for about 2 weeks.
Sounds
she
about
went
right.
home and she did tapping on that frozen shoulder and the pain in that for 1 week, and it disappeared and it's gone for good. So just really small examples. I also know people who have released themselves of things like fibromyalgia, thyroid, and Graves' disease, like quite a few chronic health conditions that can be influenced for some people by addressing the stress and emotional contributing factors to those conditions. So there's a very strong connection. In terms of talking about somebody who has made massive changes, oh gosh, who do we even pick? But yeah, I've definitely worked with people. I'm thinking of one of my clients who came to me because of a work issue. So she was really unhappy with her work situation, was like, I got to quit this job. It's an absolute disaster, but I don't know what I'm going to do. So we worked on it for a while. We set some small goals, we set some bigger goals. And in the time that we worked together, it was surprising how quickly we went from working on a career issue and very specific things in work to talking about relationships and being able to heal and change perspective on how home relationships were versus work relationships. And in that time, because I worked with this person for a period of time, there were some health challenges that needed to be addressed. And so we can actually use this tool to address all of those different ups and downs in life, and in doing that, really increase the capacity of someone's ability to cope with difficult situations over time, and really remarkably change who they are in terms of their ability to cope with your word you said before that you really love, resilience. This is what it's about. It's about increasing one's resilience. It's not about never having another stressful situation again. Actually, that's life and that's the human experience. And that's probably another thing that we don't understand and no physicist can really explain for us yet. why do we experience things the way we do in all of these human experiences? But the reality is that we're going to have stressful situations. And do you go from being a person who is bawling their eyes out, not even figuring out how they can get up and go to work the next day or look after their children or whatever it might be, to being somebody who's like, whoa, that was a big thing that just happened this week. Yikes, let's work on that a bit, please. Or I'll do some tapping today because, wow, that was a lot. But actually, I'm going to be okay, and I know I'm going to be okay because I have the resilience to be able to deal with those difficult situations. Does that kind of answer your question?
Absolutely. And I know, we talk a little bit, you focus a lot on emotional well-being specifically for busy mums. And that's part of the reason why I really wanted you as a guest on here because, I literally, that is who I work with the most. And I'm all about rebuilding that confidence, not just physically with the body confidence, but confidence in. We'll talk a little bit about mum guilt as well. But what are some of the most common emotional challenges that you see when it comes to mums, in particular, busy working mums, and how would you help women manage them through EFT and other stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head actually with the confidence piece.
Yeah.
And that can come from a variety of different backgrounds, reasons, areas where people feel confident or not. If I use my own example, I actually seemed like a very regulated, very confident person in my workplace in my prior career, right? So I don't think anyone would have thought that I wasn't confident, but bring me back home into my home environment and I fell apart really easily. And I'm talking sort of pre-doing a fair bit of work with EFT. I don't feel that way anymore, but really my confidence in my ability to be a parent, and it is one of the reasons why I work with people on guilt and shame and embarrassment about their parenting and their ability to show up as a parent, is because it was an experience that I had. I really, really struggled. And one of the biggest things that I've learned is to, one, be able to release that guilt. And EFT tapping is essentially a tool that can help us to release any emotion that we want to release. Now, we need to find out, why do we feel guilty, address the specific situations, what are the situations where it's coming up to be a problem for an individual. But that's absolutely one of the easiest things that we can use it for, is to release emotions. So being able to release the guilt allows us to, again, naturally come out from a more confident place, and from a more confident place, whether it be as a parent like it was for me, or maybe for some other people and maybe some of my clients even, it's in the workplace, not feeling like they have the worth that they genuinely do, in the workplace. And so everybody's a little bit different in terms of how we're going to address things. Ultimately, when I work with people, it's always about, okay, what's causing the problem and where do we really want to be? And if we can figure out those two things, we can absolutely get there, because we can heal the things that are causing the problem and allow us to naturally move towards, without a lot of effort. It's not about setting a really difficult goal and then going for it. It's about actually naturally releasing the things that are holding us back, the limiting beliefs, the emotional blocks, the worry, the overwhelm, the embarrassment and the shame, if there's been things in the past that haven't gone well, releasing those so that naturally we can show up as a more confident version of ourselves.
And obviously we're discussing about the EFT and being used as a tool when things are getting bad. Speaking preventative, though, what kind of daily practices do you recommend as well that people do, women do, mums do, in the background to almost that's preventative? I mean, people obviously, I assume you can still do EFT tapping anyway, but we're talking about using EFT tapping almost like an emergency help as well. What daily habits, daily practices do you recommend that people can do in as well as that? Because obviously people might not have time to always do the tapping side of things. I assume it takes a bit of time. It needs to be on your own a little bit. Or find some space. People might feel like it's their time. So, what else? What other practices do you think that will benefit as well to achieving emotion freedom?
Yeah, absolutely. So I I think again, it's individual, but it's probably a lot of the stuff that you recommend as well. So moving, you know, whatever exercise works really well for you. I love walking. I love being out in nature, and that is also very very good for our mental and emotional health. Being out in nature, being in community with other people, so connecting with family and friends, having a laugh wherever you can. Those sorts of things are really really preventative to our mental health. With the tapping, there's a couple of different ways that you can use it. One of the cool things is that you don't have to do it every day. You don't even have to do it 2 or 3 times a week like you kind of need to exercise, right? You don't actually have to do that. Once you know how to do some of the basics properly, you can just use it whenever you want to. And yes, you're right, to go deep and heal some of those really big emotions, it does take a little bit of time. And sometimes you need someone else to help you with it. Sometimes you can do it by yourself and you just need 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the day. But you can also just use it literally for 2 minutes in the afternoon when, I don't know, your kid came home from school and said, had a meltdown, whatever it is. And you're like, you're having an emotional reaction. Walking into the bathroom and doing 1 minute of tapping can be extremely helpful. So there's lots of different ways that we can use the tapping tools, because there are lots of different ones of them to help out. Little like peppering it a little bit throughout the day and then obviously doing deeper work. But yeah, there are also so many other things like, eating well so you feel good, being healthy, doing a little bit of meditation or yoga, those sorts of things. Deep breathing can be amazing. I think deep breathing has probably been expected to do more than it can. If you're really triggered and really feeling upset, trying to take deep breaths will work if you can make yourself do it. But that's not always possible. So it can be a really helpful thing if you're really upset to do deep breathing. But what I find better is a little bit of tapping and acknowledging whatever it is that's really upset you, right? Because that's like letting it out, letting it flow, as opposed to, I'm going to just get through this, is almost a bit more of a suppression.
Yeah.
Whereas with the tapping, we can really acknowledge it. So, were those are the things that I use. But really, the question would be to my client, to your client, what feels good? What has you in a really good mental headspace? And let's do more of that. Let's find more of those resources. Maybe it's time with your kids. Maybe it's time with your pets. Maybe it's, going for a walk every day. Maybe it's, doing a little meditation. Those sorts of things are all really super good for you.
I know you talk a lot about mum guilt. Now, obviously, I'm not a mum, and I have raised a child though as a stepfather. I was raised pretty much by a single mum for most of my life, so I have some idea, and I work with mums primarily. But I'll understand. I've never been a mum, and I won't be. But so for someone like myself, of someone listening to this, what do we think? What do you mean by mum guilt? And then how specifically can can EFT help with that? What kind of triggers are associated with that term mum guilt?
Great. So it's everything from the way you emotionally react to your kids. We all get a bit irritable, snappy sometimes, angry, yelling. So there can be emotional things like that then leave us feeling guilty. It could be things like needing to go off to work and leaving our kids in someone else's care and not being there. It could be not being able to provide everything that we want to be able to provide, whether that be emotionally, whether that be Um, it's even little things like, am I feeding my kids the right food? Oh, I let them eat McDonald's. Oh, I feel so guilty. I'm a bad parent, right? We have these, and we have these stories and expectations of what we're supposed to be able to do in a day. And some of them are very unrealistic, very unrealistic. And and some of them might be realistic for some people and might not be the reality for another person. And so everybody's guilt is different, and yet I think it's a really, really common feeling that many mothers do experience for one reason or another. And so how we address that is to address the very specific thing that's causing the guilt in the first place. And the other thing is, we only address it when the guilt itself is coming up and being a problem. So I would ask my client, if I was working with somebody who is saying, well, you talked about mum guilt, and I do have a lot of mum guilt. I'd say, okay, how's that showing up to be a problem for you? Are you getting to the end of every day and just feeling awful about yourself and feeling really guilty? Okay, that's actually quite simple. We can address that quite quickly and easily. Or are you racking yourself to try and figure out a different way to change your career, or whether you should take a promotion in your career because it'll take you further away from your kids, for example? So you might have guilt at even considering the idea. So then we're working through, okay, so what does it look like really if you do take that new promotion, and maybe it means that your hours at work extend a little bit? What does that genuinely look like in your life, and which part of that for you is really upsetting? Because what's really interesting is we can ask 10 different women who might have the same issue and say, oh, I'm feeling really guilty about spending too much time at work. If I ask 10 different women, okay, tell me more about what it is that makes you feel guilty about that, each one of their answers will be very different. And I know that sounds kind of funny, but it really is, because we have these stories in our minds about what it is that's important, and we have values as well, which tell us what's important and what's not. And so I can ask my client, what is it about this situation that's really upsetting you, that's making you feel really guilty? Well, I feel guilty because I won't be home to give my kids afternoon tea straight after school, which is what my mum did, and I'm not doing the thing that my mum did. Oh, okay. All right, that's making you feel really guilty. Let's do some tapping on that. See if we can just release the guilt. It doesn't mean that you have to not come at home after school. What I find is that when we release the negative emotions around a situation, we think more clearly, because I'm sure like when your emotional brain comes on board, the front part of your brain, the thinking part of the brain, doesn't work as well, right?
Yeah.
So what we do is we release the guilt and the other negative feelings, whatever they are, around this thought that I'm not going to be there for my kids straight after school. And then the person can think more clearly, and they'll come up with their own answer to that. It'll be different for everyone again. And they might say, do you know what? Yeah, this is really important to me that I be home for my kids after school. I wonder how else I can advance my career without sacrificing that. And a different person will say, do you know what? My kids actually do sport 4 nights out of 5 after school. I don't even know why I'm thinking about this. It's completely irrelevant. They're not there anyway. Actually, we all get home at a similar time. And they literally weren't thinking of that before. I know that sounds kind of unbelievable, but it's true. People will genuinely not be thinking of that. And the thing that's racking them of their guilt is actually not even logical. It's just emotional. And once we remove that difficult and negative emotion, they're like, oh, you know what, I can totally take this. It'll make almost no difference to my kids and myself, and we'll all have a great time. Does that
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And I think extended to fitness as well, in the sense that a lot of the time busy mums might feel guilty of self-care, because fitness is still self-care, when mums want to look after themselves, but they feel guilty because they feel like they're prioritizing their self-care, their fitness, their own health and fitness, when their priority. And maybe society is a part of that stigma, where it's like, no, you're a mum now, so your whole life is your kids. And I agree. However, I always say, what good are you to people you love and care about if you're not healing yourself? we use the analogy a lot on a plane, right? On a plane, when they're doing the demonstration, the health and safety demonstration, it's saying, look, when you if the plane's going down into water, and you need to put your own life jacket on before you put your child's life jacket on, and that can trigger some. Well, no, my kid's my top priority. Yeah, but the point of the message is, what good are you to the people you love and care about, your children, if you're not looking after yourself first? And I kind of use that a lot for my messages towards my clients. It's like, look, you don't have to feel guilty about prioritizing your own health and fitness. Not only does that make you better to be able to keep up with the kids, and if you're looking after yourself, you're better, but also from your children's eyes, there is a good message to, at that young age, children are watching what the parents do with, eyes are like a hawk. They're constantly watching how you behave, and if they see you prioritizing your own health, they see you exercising, they see you doing therapy like EFT tapping, or even just breathing like we spoke about before, that's a great message for a child to learn and go, oh, that's how we look after ourselves. So I think I guess I see mum guilt from that side of things, doing what I do. But I guess it all falls into the same thing, doesn't it? Which is self-care, self-healing is not selfish. Like it needs to be done so everyone feels the benefit.
Callum, you're so right. And that is a huge, huge area of mum guilt, is anything that is self-care. And I couldn't agree more. That's a very, very common belief. And I agree 100% with you that it's coming from this all sorts of different areas. And that's what's interesting. So why do you feel guilty taking time for yourself? And again, everyone will have a different experience of that. And it is helpful for us to encourage and let mums know that, looking after yourself is to the benefit of not only yourself, but also to your children. But what's really interesting is, where did that story come from? Why do you think it's not okay to look after yourself, right? Did you not have a role model that looked after themselves and that sacrificed themselves and did only that? And why do you think they did that? And was that a healthy thing for them to be doing? But we can very deeply ingrain, like you said, as a child, the generation of mums right now, watched our mums not use self-care, right? And so we deeply ingrained this belief that self-care mustn't be a good thing. Maybe self-care is a bit selfish. Maybe that's taking away from, right? And so when things are deeply ingrained to that level that they're a belief, they can be harder to shift by just education, by just saying, hey, but hold on a second, let's look at our kids. We can definitely make some shifts that way. And, we're all smart people, we can rethink things. But sometimes the belief is very deep, and it's, I want to say, viscerally in our body, making us feel like, but it doesn't feel comfortable. I don't feel okay going and spending this time away from my kids, going and spending time doing my exercise and, and those sorts of things. And that's, again, where we want to actually address what's that feeling in the body and how can we release that feeling in the body so that we can really use our brain to say, yeah, I know, self-care for me is so important. Exercise for me actually should come first. Yeah.
Basically, self-care isn't selfish. And like you said, I don't know where this stigma came from, but I guess, like you said, it starts from, you said something interesting and I immediately thought of my mum. And ironically, my mum's been a client of mine many times now. But yeah, and this is no shame on my mum, because her parents and so on, you're right, I never really saw my mum practice any form of self-care, exercise, and I guess that's where it starts. And then I believe society then takes over the rest, particularly with social media. I mean, social media works now in a way because I believe the rise of holistic care, EFT, even mindfulness, I feel like the rise of that, again, since the pandemic, I would say, has become very it's worked in favour, I believe, because now people are consuming with a lot of apps. Journaling is a big thing for me. Meditation apps are about, there's lots of audio books and podcasts now that people can listen to while driving. So if they're driving in traffic, they're stuck and they're stressed, they can now just go on Spotify and have an audio book of soothing sentences and mantras. So I believe that actually now society is shifting a bit more into that, even though there's still a lot of negativity and a lot of stress. But I do think there's a big push for self-care. But you're right, I think when it starts as a child, your inspiration or what you'll see is what your parents are doing. So I think a good message to take from this is bear that in mind before you try and experience mum guilt and think that, I shouldn't be prioritising myself, because turn it around and go, actually, I want my children to see that self-care is actually not selfish, and it'll benefit them in their adult life. And I think that's the thing, mums are thinking of their children, not so much their future. They're thinking of the children in the now. Right now, they're my priority. They need me to just be there. But a part of being a parent is also thinking long term. Well, how do I want them to behave? How do I want them to think? How do I want to make sure they don't get overwhelmed with stress when they're an adult, And I think that's a shift that I would give advice, just adding on to what you said, Heidi, from my experience, which is, same as fitness. You want your child not only to think about where they are now, but when they're an adult, do you want them to experience the same stress you're going through? No. So self-care is not only beneficial to you, but it's going to be beneficial to them in the long term. It's the long game, isn't it?
Yes, it is the long game. And I'm going to also echo what you said earlier, in that doing that fitness and, of course, doing things like EFT tapping as well actually do benefit not only ourselves, but our children as well in the now too, right? Because if we show up in front of our kids with a more resilient, more regulated nervous system, I guarantee you they will be less stressed themselves, they'll be easier to manage, and everyone will have a better time together. I guarantee it. And you get that from exercise, from going for your walk, from going to the gym, from doing some EFT tapping and doing both the healing as well as the general light tapping that we can do day to day. All of those things allow us to have a more regulated, more resilient nervous system and show up in a better way for our kids today, straight after that session.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Heidi, I am a weight loss specialist, I guess. General fitness is my passion, but I would say that the thing that I specialise in the most is weight loss. And I know that you have some benefits to share when it comes to EFT for weight loss as well. So how can, for people, a lot of people are going to be listening to this, are going to be my audience, who are into fitness, they want to lose weight, they want to get fitter and healthier. What ways can EFT benefit that as well? We've talked a lot about mental stress at the moment, but if we're switching back over to the body's health as a whole, we mentioned at the start of this, the mind and body are one. What benefit can EFT have for weight loss as well as general fitness?
Yeah. So one of the things that EFT has had most studied is tapping an EFT for food cravings. And a lot of the study and the research will show that EFT tapping, when you focus on it for particular foods and food cravings, will reduce those cravings by about 70 to 75%. That's really significant.
Wow.
So
yeah.
that's just one small area, but it's one that's been studied a lot, so it's worth bringing up. So any of the psychological or emotional pieces to why we're not doing what we want to and we need to do can be addressed with EFT tapping. So I believe that actually many of us know kind of what we should be doing, what we sort of should be eating, what we sort of should be doing at the gym. We need direction, and it's awesome to get support and have motivation. I've used it myself, having trainers and coaches, and I'm all for that as well, by the way. But also there can be these mental blocks, whether it's things like the guilt or whether it's it can be a subconscious fear. Like, for example, I had a time where I really struggled to get myself back to the gym. There was a while, and I hadn't been for a while. I have a very strange lifestyle where I move around quite a lot. My husband's into ski racing, and we travel to different locations all the time, right? So I often change my location, which interrupts
Nothing wrong with that. I love that. Yeah, I'm a fan of that, definitely.
But it means that I end up not going to the gym for a bit, right? And this one time I was really struggling to get myself back to the gym. And after a fair bit of work on it, what I realized was there was this underlying fear that I was going to hurt my back again. This was before I'd done a lot of the work on healing my back and getting it a bit stronger, and both mentally and physically. But so things like that can really hold us back from doing the thing that we want to do. So that's where EFT can come in. Okay, you say you want to be going to the gym. You've, signed up and got the program written up or whatever it might be, or I know when my classes are, and I just keep missing that one on Friday. Why do I not go to that class on Friday, even though it's my second class of the week and I know I'd feel so much better if I went? What is it that's stopping me from that? And it could be, fear of injury at a subconscious level. I want to be clear that a lot of these things that get in our way are very subconscious. We're not thinking, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to hurt my back. We're just thinking, oh, I got a bit too busy. Oh gosh, I just forgot to bring my gym clothes to work, so I can't go to the gym after work. Things kind of get in the way, but subconsciously there can be other reasons why we're not doing them. And the same in terms of our diet. We can be really, really good at eating all the right things all day, and come 8 o'clock at night, all of a sudden we're in with the ice cream tub in the freezer or munching on the crisps. Why? So if I had somebody coming to me who was struggling with that, if that was the thing that was holding them back from their weight loss, we'd be working directly only on what it is that's bringing you to the ice cream or the chips or whatever. Is it something about that time of night? Maybe for some people, again, subconsciously, they feel a bit lonely at that time of night. Or maybe they just love the crunch of the chip. It just gives them a really relaxed, they just really enjoy that. And we can use tapping to reduce that emotional connection to the crunching, or that emotional feeling of feeling a bit too lonely and going straight for the ice cream instead of picking up the phone and calling a friend.
I mean, you probably see me nodding away there, because everything you just said is better than what I thought you were going to answer that question, because I'm a big 100% believer. I've got a business partner I own a gym with, and he's into holistic therapy, but his is very different. And when it comes to nutrition, his teachings have been very, if you've got a sugar craving, it's linked to low magnesium. And when it comes to minerals, for me, I'm a big believer in environment having an impact in habits. And you just said something there which completely hit me when you said, like, times. So it's all about subconscious triggers, right? So I get a lot of clients, Callum, it's sugar cravings for me. I'm like, no, you're not addicted to sugar. It's the environment. So for me, right, I'm a pizza addict. Now, I'm not physically addicted to pizza. What it is for me, and I notice these triggers, it's certain times of the evening. I could be watching a certain thing. I could be maybe on my own, at a time where family are out and about. It could be a certain time of the week, and I'll just get this sudden craving. Oh, I really want to order a pizza. Now, I'm not getting up at 6 a.m. and craving a pizza, so I'm not addicted to pizza. But it's those subconscious triggers, and I think environment, time, socialization. There's certain triggers, I think, that can do that. So I understand now how EFT can be powerful. I guess when people first hear it, because people look for fast results for weight loss. Oh yeah, cool. I can just lose 3 stone if I start tapping. No. I think agree. I'm sure. Correct me if I've got this wrong, Heidi, but what you're saying is that no, EFT will help with the mental side, the triggers, that will end up ultimately leading to better decisions, which will achieve weight loss. So that comes down to the food side, the food cravings, the guilt that we talked about before. and motivation of actually going to the gym, actually doing the things that we know. Because that's the thing when it comes to fitness. We know the benefit of it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest, I say this a lot, the hardest exercise of all time, it's not a burpee, all right? The hardest exercise of all time is getting the keys, getting in the car, and driving to the gym. Or if we're working out at home, it's getting ready, getting that mat down on the floor, and starting. The hardest exercise of all is turning up. It's and because we know the benefits after, and I guess I can imagine again that's how EFT can help deal with that side of things. So yeah, thanks for answering that, because that sounds absolutely spot on to what I would agree with.
Yeah, 100%. The difficult part is that a lot of it's subconscious. We don't know until we just do a little bit of exploration, and sometimes we just need to sort of tune in a little bit more or get a bit more curious. Is it always in the evening? Is it always a Thursday night? Who have I just seen? Who have I just spoken to when I start to crave the pizza? Right? Am I just driving home from work and it's just getting in the car now that triggers that feeling of I'm really hungry? That was the release of the stress of the end of the day, maybe. I agree with you, like the environment, the people, the things that are happening, our thoughts in our mind, they're often what we're working towards. And then, it's much easier to make those easy decisions, those good decisions that we already want to make. We already want to do it. We know we want to be going to the gym, right?
Yeah. It makes complete sense. So go back to EFT then. I mean, so let's say someone's interested in it, they've listened to this or they've done their own research. What would you say is the best way then to start the process, start getting into it? What are the best practices to? Because I guess it's like anything. You don't want to dive straight in. I've always said that humans are habitual creatures, by default. It's like I don't like the all or nothing approach when people have when it comes to going through changes. That's why I'm not a fan here in the UK. I don't know if it's the same down under, but I don't know if we have dry January here, right? So every January, people are like, right, I'm going to give up drinking. I'm going to stop this. We have it every January. I'm going to stop going to the gym. It's a new year, new me. And I'm like, the human brain, more specifically the emotional side, the subconscious mind, doesn't work like that. We're driven by habit. So whilst it's great to set these goals and start a journey, absolutely, overwhelm is still a negative experience for the body. So just because you're overwhelming yourself with good intentions, good ideas, the body still recognises it as stress. It's overwhelm. So very quickly, you're not going to stick to it. So I imagine it's similar with EFT, Heidi. So what would be the best way for someone who's interested in this and would like to get started?
Yeah, so there's a few different things. I have a sort of, I think it's 5-minute video on my website, which takes you through probably the most basic exercises to take you from sort of that rushed, frantic, stressed state into a more calm state, just showing you the basics of tapping at this as part of that. So that might be somewhere to start. That might just be like, oh, let's just try that exercise and see if it feels good or not. Do it a few times and see if it feels helpful. I also have a course that people can do that's completely self-paced. It's quite affordable, that will take people through, broken down, a bit of what we've talked about today, some background about EFT and the very basic techniques that I believe are the most useful ones that you can use for yourself at home. So this is for those moments when, I've been, I'm upset or I'm overwhelmed. In the course, I teach you how to really reduce that stress response. And then really it's up to somebody to feel like, yeah, I've got this big enough problem that I really want some help. And that's when you decide, let's have a chat. Let's see if you'd like to, take it to that next level and do a session where you're getting the space held for you and you're taught, one-to-one how to do the technique. I also still recommend doing the course as well, because the reason why I developed that course was because even when I'd done a few sessions myself, kind of like you did it last year, right? you don't learn it by just doing one or just a few sessions. You don't learn the techniques yourself, and learning them to have them for yourself is so powerful that I really recommend doing that, even if you choose to do one-on-one sessions with myself or some other practitioner. Like, you might be like, yeah, that sounds kind of interesting, but she's a bit weird. I'm not sure if she's for me. That's fine. There are lots of other practitioners. You can go to a website called EFT International, who is like a governing body of practitioners who have been well trained, certified and accredited through EFT International. We'll show you some people who have done good training in this area, because there's tapping and there's tapping. Anybody can do a little bit of tapping, and that can be helpful. But if you really want to make significant changes, working with somebody who's been well trained is important as well. So hopefully those things are helpful.
Absolutely. So it's been very enlightening. Absolutely. It's something that hopefully people listening to this will give a go. So Heidi, where can they go and listeners go and give you a little follow? Where can they find you, learn a little bit more, and potentially join your EFT tribe?
Yeah, so probably the two places to find me the easiest would be on my website, which is tap-in.com.au for Australia, because I'm in Australia. And then the other place would be in my Facebook group, which is EFT Tapping Tribe. If you just look up EFT Tapping Tribe, you'll find my group and you can join there, and then, we can interact from that space as well.
Fantastic. So I'll put the links to that in the show notes of this episode, guys. If you've currently listened to that, go and check that out straight away. Go and check out Heidi's Facebook and go and give her a little bit more follow. If you're interested in this, I encourage you to go and check out a little bit more, particularly at this time of year. I think post-summer, for us in the Northern Hemisphere, I think post-summer, into as we start entering the autumn season, even though it's an exciting time in a way, because you've got the Halloween into the Christmas sort of period, but it's stressful. We're talking about mums, actually it's stressful the run up to Christmas. I think I read something very daft, which is there is something like 55 nights till Christmas. That's scary. I know, sorry about that, Heidi. That's scary, and that can trigger, again, we're talking about triggers, that can subconsciously trigger some stress. So it makes this the time of year, plus the weather is not turning too great for us here. So I think that'll be good to go and check that out, guys. And yeah, particularly because a lot of my listeners, for some reason, are from Canada. So most of my audience are very north, and it's very cold right now.
Well, my husband's Canadian, and we've spent a lot of time in Canada. So I'm with you, and I'm also going to be in Europe, so back on your time zone come the end of the year as well, because, we're skiers and we need to be in a Northern Hemisphere time zone. So we'll be back to winter before you know it.
Fantastic. Also, Heidi, thank you very much for joining, jumping on this episode. I've taken some real benefit from this. It's something that I'll be interested in trying myself. Obviously, I've had a little bit of experience, but as you said, just the one session is not going to be enough. It's something that you need to, I guess, just like exercise. It's got to be consistent. You've got to stick to something and keep going with it, Awesome. So, yeah, thank you very much for jumping on. I'll make sure, guys, you can check out the show notes, go and check out a little bit more about Heidi and her work. Thank you very much, Heidi. It's been a great conversation. And I wish, all the best. I can't wait to see where it goes. And hopefully we'll speak again and I'll be a lot more experienced in this.
That'd be great. It was really a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me, Callum. Really enjoyed it. Great conversation.
No problem. Awesome. Take care and all the best.